Hey, it's Corey, and today I've taken a lot of the questions that you've asked either on YouTube videos or I've gotten on Patreons, and I've compiled them into a little review video. If you don't already know the answers to some of these questions, then great, you're in a wonderful place. Let's learn together. Or if you do already know the answers, see if you can kind of test your knowledge about where you're at. So let's get started. The first one I'm going to talk about is just tuning. I get asked by so many people, do I have to tune my uke every single time I play? Yes, you do. Please tune your uke every time you play. And with that, it's really important to make sure you're using a reliable tuner when you tune. I tune in a couple different ways. I use a phone app when I just need that quick tuning and I don't really care about 100% accuracy. I'll do this when I'm playing myself or I need to pick up a uke super fast and just play something. But if I am going to film a video, if I'm playing for people, if I'm going to put in some really dedicated practice time, I always make sure to use an external tuner. I really like the Silver Snark. You can get tuners for really cheap, or like the one I use on my phone, you can get it for free. And speaking of tuning, there's two different ways people are going to regularly tune their ukes. They're either going to use the standard tuning of G, C, E, A. That's what you're going to find on most soprano, concert, and tenor ukes, but you could also tune it to D, G, B, F. Now you're gonna find mostly on baritones. So it's just good to have that just be memorized so you can just recall it really instantly. And finally too, with the tuning, the baritone tuning makes it really easy for uke players to transfer their knowledge to guitar, and also for guitarists to be able to start playing uke. The next big category I want to talk about are some questions when it comes to chords. The first one I want to address is probably the most common question I get ever, and that is, if you're not strumming all the strings, do you have to play the entire chord? The reason why I get this question most often is because sometimes on my easy picking pattern videos, I will reference playing an A chord where this is our positioning for that, but you might only be picking strings 3 and 1. People then ask, well, why do I have to make the A minor chord if I'm not even picking that string? The reason for that, and you can apply this to any chord, so I'm just demonstrating it with the A minor here, is if you don't have your finger in that position and you accidentally pluck the 4th string, for instance, in that chord, you're not going to have the right pitches you need to be able to make the reference of an A minor chord. Or if you're strumming, you're just not going to have an A minor chord. And that's the case for any chord where if you have a finger positioning and maybe you're not gonna pick that string, maybe you're not strumming that string for some reason. But if you make a mistake and you accidentally strum another string, you're going to end up with a completely different chord, or it's going to sound incredibly dissonant. There are some really advanced players that are on that professional level that they might be making adjustments really specifically because of the song that they're playing, and that is a completely different situation. They have really methodically thought about where they need to place their fingers, and they're not thinking purely just in chord basic shape. They're starting to probably actually use different chord positionings based on what they need to play. And I do offer those sometimes where we will omit certain strings or we'll have a completely different chord formation that works better for the song. But again, that's after we've really thought about it and thought about the journey that your fingers are going to need to take in that moment or in that song to make it as easy as possible. The next bit about chords that I really want to touch on are chord qualities. The reason why I want to bring this up is because a lot of times people will use different chords because maybe some chords are easier to play than others, where they have the same letter name, but it's a completely different quality. A really good example of this would be the E7 and the E major chord. I see a lot of times tutorials, and I've done this too when it's worked, where people will say, oh, you don't have to play the E major here. That's really hard to play, so play the E7 instead, which is a lot easier. But again, an E7 is a very different chord than an E major. And so it works in the situations where if you can play that chord in the melody line that you're singing or the other pitches that are being played around that chord, if they still work together, you can replace it. However, there's a lot of songs where this just doesn't work. So when you throw an E7 in, it's giving a completely different vibe. It's giving a different feel. Composers and songwriters, they use the different qualities that chords have, whether it's major, minor, augmented, diminished. You could have even sevenths as well. These are different qualities. So each quality really has a different feel, and historically, there have been different feelings and uses for those different chord qualities. So just really be mindful of when you're just replacing different chords. Our next big category is practice. And for those of you that have been watching my videos for a while, or you're in my Patreon community, this next comment is probably not going to surprise you. When it comes to practice, small bursts of practice time consistently throughout the week is always going to be better than playing for a really long period of time once a week. Music playing is a skill that has to be practiced over time consistently. Over time, the longer you practice this, the easier it's going to be for you to sort of make adjustments to your plan on the fly. So when I sit down to practice, I don't have to like write out what I'm going to do, but I've been practicing music for over half of my life at this point, and I've done this professionally for over a decade. So that kind of stuff has been ingrained in me, but I had to really work on it back when I was first establishing that good practice habit and those skills associated with it. It's also going to be really helpful if you record yourself. A lot of people have a smartphone these days that has a simple audio recording, notes app, or even video recording. It can be really, really awkward to do this. Trust me, I still hate watching my own videos, and the editing process for me is kind of really terrible half the time because I hate watching myself on film. However, I have learned a lot by watching myself on film. There's also a lot of different learning styles for people. For me, I'm a read-write person, so even if I record myself, I have to take notes and then I will remember the information versus if I just saw it in a video or heard it in a recording. It also provides you a great opportunity to see your progress over time. Also, when you're practicing, use a metronome. That is another one that I'm sure anybody who has ever heard any of these types of videos before from my channel is going to hear. Metronome, metronome, metronome. You can get a fancy one, you can get a cheap one, you can get a free one. There are so many different apps that provide a metronome, but it's something that allows you to have a very consistent, steady beat. Tempo irregularities is one of the biggest things I see with both new musicians, but also professional musicians. It's something that everyone struggles with. I know for myself, I'm a bit of a rusher, so that means I will push the tempo and try to increase it over time. But even when I practice and prepare, I'm always practicing with a metronome. So then when I go to play, hopefully I'm giving you the most consistent tempo possible during a tutorial. And if you don't know how to actually use it, like you have a metronome, but you don't know how to use it, comment down below and I can create a video to show you really how to use a metronome, because it's the best tool a musician's ever gonna have. Next category is going to be a really quick one, but I feel like I need to verbalize this, and it's about strumming. Strumming patterns aren't really a thing. Strumming patterns are things that we have created. I see them pretty much only in the ukulele community. I don't really see them a whole lot in guitar, because honestly, a lot of the times it's changing a lot more. You're using a lot of different techniques, and if you look in really any book, it's not going to give you a recommended strumming pattern, and that's what they are. They're recommendations. So if I give a recommendation, that is just what it is. It's a recommendation. There's no official strumming pattern for any song. You can change them. It's okay. All right, my final one is probably my most controversial, and that is just simply the pronunciation of the instrument. Whether you call it a ukulele, or an ukulele, basically, from all the sources of information I have reached out to with different people in the circles I run with, I've asked people that are native to Hawaii, I've asked people that work with the instrument primarily, basically what everybody kind of says is, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Lots of people are gonna have different opinions about this though, so just be aware of that. My answer is not the end-all answer. If you want to use the pronunciation more traditionally, you should use ukulele. If you are saying it really short, you can say uke. If you're using the Americanized version, you can say ukulele. You know, everyone's gonna have a different preference of this. Sometimes it's easier to use one pronunciation over the other. So I think personally, the most important thing that I would want people to be doing is just playing. You know, have that respect for it, understand the history for it. I probably use ukulele more than ukulele. I do notice that, like, if I'm referring to things like historically, I typically use ukulele more than ukulele. So, you know, it's a thing that I'm still not totally sure on, because honestly, I get a lot of different answers. So ultimately, all you can do is do what you feel comfortable with. But all in all, these are just some of the questions that I frequently get asked that I figured a video to sum them all up would be really helpful. Let me know in the comments whether there's any information that you were surprised by, anything that you felt like you already knew, and other questions that you still have. I like to compile all these questions, and when I feel like I have enough to talk about, I make a video for it. So I really value your guys' feedback on it too. Otherwise, if you have any other questions or concerns, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!